Okay, I see that it's now 4:30, so I will call the committee, the whole meeting to order. And first I will acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Chilliwack First Nation. And I have a notice for attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item to which they want to speak. Okay, I will also move from the chair the approval of the meeting location, and I'll look for unanimous consent of council. I move that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016, as amended, the August 18th, 2026 committee of the whole meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility was provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting will be located at the Clackwood Sound Theatre, 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. There are no objections, that will be carried. Seeing none, that's carried. And I'll also look for unanimous consent for the agenda. Now move that the August 18th, 2026 Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. Seeing no objection, that is carried. And one item to look for unanimous consent is the recommendation for adoption of the minutes. And I'll move that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held June 9th, 2026 be adopted. And objections, that is carried and they're adopted. Now we move to public comment on agenda items. And Heather would make the call for public comment.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I will now make an open call for comments. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, please raise your hand. If there is anyone online via Zoom that would like to make a comment, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before making a comment, you will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you are speaking to. I will now do a call. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. There are no comments at this time, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. We have no delegations today or correspondence, so we'll move to our presentations and reports. And our first report is the source water assessment report from Infrastructure and Public Works. Has a presentation for us.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council and members of the Committee of the Whole. This afternoon, I'm presenting the finalized source water assessment report. The purpose of the report is to confirm the recommended near to medium term water supply direction, outline the long-term option and summarize feedback received from the community and Clarkwood. This work reflects several years of operational improvements, data collection, and planning, and it represents the cumulative progress the district has made since 2022. As the report notes, the district's water system is under increasing pressure from climate-driven low flows, aging infrastructure, and peak season demand. These pressures often require the system to operate beyond its intended capacity. The 2024 Water Master Plan confirmed a maximum day raw water deficit and identified several critical renewal needs across supply, treatment, and distribution. That work established the foundation for long-term source water planning. The committee first reviewed the draft source water assessment in November 2024 and again in February 2026 this year, where staff presented a short list of viable options and summarized early watershed discussions with Cloquet. Cloquet First Nation provided preliminary support for advancing 3 options for further consideration, those being the Okmossis Reservoir expansion, Kennedy Lake, and the Lost Shoe Aquifer. Further endorsement discussions will be required should council approve staff's recommendation from the report. Before speaking to the source options, I want to acknowledge the substantial work completed over the past 4 years to strengthen the district's existing water system. Since 2022, staff have modernized a leak detection program, improved preventative maintenance programming, and significantly expanded monitoring of creek flows and consumption patterns. Council's organizational restructuring during this period also expanded the district's level of service by adding capacity in asset management, capital delivery, and operational oversight. This increased capacity has allowed staff to implement several level of service optimizations, improving system monitoring and responding more effectively to peak season pressures. These improvements supported the district's response in the 2023 drought, where operational changes increased raw water capture and reduced the strain on the municipal system. Staff also made targeted adjustments on the Okmossis side, shifting production to the Bay Street side only on the weekends during dry periods, which allowed the reservoir to recharge and improve overall system resilience. Together, these efforts have given staff a much clearer understanding of how the system behaves under stress and where effective interventions can be made. They also provide the technical foundation for the recommendation in the report before the committee tonight. Staff evaluated each shortlisted option using criteria such as hydrological reliability, treatment compatibility, operational risk, regulatory obligations, transmission distance, capital and life cycle cost, governance complexity, and alignment with the official community plan. This provided a transparent and defensible basis for comparing the shortlisted options. The report identifies the Okmossis Reservoir expansion as the most practical, affordable, and technically feasible near to medium-term solution. This option nearly doubles the raw water storage capacity of the reservoir, extending the district's summer low flow supply window from about 38 days to about 54 days. It builds on an existing source, integrates with the current treatment and distribution system, and provides a straightforward path to increasing supply capacity without introducing new conveyance corridors. Staff will also evaluate the feasibility of lowering the reservoir intake pipe, which could increase usable storage and further strengthen drought resilience. The capital program associated with the option renews aging. The capital program associated with this option renews aging critical water assets, which will reduce system level failure risk and improve redundancy and emergency response capabilities. The estimated cost at this time for this program is 61.3 million, with a range of 36.8 to 85.8 million until further work can improve cost certainty. To support senior government funding application in 2027, staff recommend exploring integrated project delivery or another progressive procurement model. This approach can improve shovel-ready cost certainty and help align project phases with emerging federal and provincial funding streams. Kennedy Lake is identified as the preferred long-term regional source. It is the largest freshwater lake on Vancouver Island, fed by multiple tributaries with stable year-round inflows and no identified saltwater inversion risk. It provides a level of hydrological stability that smaller watersheds and groundwater sources cannot match. A regional Kennedy Lake system could potentially support multiple communities along the peninsula, the west coast, and nations through a shared long-term supply framework subject to governance, regulatory, environmental, technical, and financial considerations. However, Kennedy Lake is not a near-term solution. It requires this extensive governance, regulatory, environmental, technical, and financial work before construction could begin. A multi-government committee would be required to address water allocation, licensing, land tenure, environmental review, cost sharing, and emergency management. The high-level capital estimate at this time is 175 million, which would also include transition costs for decommissioning the district's existing assets. The Lost Shoe Aquifer is technically viable, but it carries several notable risks that limits its suitability as a near-term option. The aquifer contains naturally occurring iron and manganese, which would require a robust treatment process and add operational complexity. Preliminary assessments also suggest that the aquifer may exhibit surface water influence, meaning additional regulatory requirements and more stringent treatment standards may apply. From an operational standpoint, the long transmission distance along Highway 4 introduces vulnerability, both in terms of maintenance access and exposure to disruptions along the corridor. Land access considerations involve multiple jurisdictions, which adds governance and permitting complexity. Because of these factors, significant additional investigations would be required before feasibility could be confirmed. The high-level capital estimate of approximately 155 million, and when combined with the technical uncertainties and operational risks, the option provides less certainty for near-term implementation. The Tyastanis and or Parks Canada treated water option is also technically feasible, but it carries as well significant regulatory and operational dependencies that place it in a higher risk category. Under this model, the district would rely on an externally operated federal treatment system, meaning the district would still remain legally responsible for water quality within the district distribution system while having no direct control over treatment facilities, treatment decisions, maintenance schedules, emergency response, or future capital renewal upgrades. This dependency introduces governance complexity and limits the district's ability to manage risk within its own system. The transmission corridor would also require upgrades to integrate externally treated water into the low pressure zone, adding cost and operational considerations within the district. Because the district would be dependent on another operator for source control, treatment systems, and system visibility, this option does not provide the level of certainty required for a primary water supply strategy. For these reasons, staff do not recommend advancing this option as part of the near-term or long-term servicing plan. Regardless of the long-term options selected, the district must complete baseline renewals to its water asset portfolio to maintain safe and reliable service. These renewals through the Water Master Plan and Source Water Assessment total 33.1 million with a range of 20 to 46 million and include essential upgrades to components such as the Bay Street Pump Station, the Osmosis Water Treatment Plant, and critical supply and distribution assets, both on Mears Island and within the district boundaries. On May 4th, staff hosted a public open house to share preliminary findings and gather feedback. Feedback received through this engagement included strong support for the Okmossis Reservoir expansion, caution regarding the Lost Shoe Aquifer, a desire for continued education, conservation messaging, and transparent communications about Kennedy Lake. This feedback aligns closely with the recommendation direction. And with that, the committee has the recommendation, in the agenda package, and available for any questions and to support discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bridger. I'll look to meeting minutes if there are any questions on the report. Councillor Sloman.
I just had, thank you for the report. I thought it was really good. I appreciated all the references that you used to connect it. But my one question regarding the report was about the expansion of the Okmossis raw water reservoir. The budget is 8.2 million. And to me, I read this as the rest of these prices have to be done regardless. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, that is correct.
Any further questions? Councillor McMaster.
If Kennedy Lake was ready to go, what would be your recommendation?
Through the chair, very good question. Hypothetically, if Kennedy Lake was ready to go at this time, that may change what the recommendation would be and how staff would look at recommending the near-term solution.
The point being, I've only lived here for 20 years, and I think everybody has talked about Kennedy Lake being the solution for Tofino's water problem. And I'm not aware until recently of any discussions with TFN about trying to solve that problem or with any other government departments. So, we're almost being forced into a band-aid solution till we get down to Kennedy Lake many years down the road. So we're spending 61 million, which is about a third of the cost of what you're estimating Kennedy Lake would be. So, I mean, I'll support the recommendation, but I would like to see something in there that includes we'll have, start ongoing discussions with TFN and other levels of government for the Kennedy Lake option down the road, rather than just leaving it to the stage when we suddenly start panicking about running out of water again after this development.
Councillor Steer and then Sawyer.
Great, thank you through the chair. Just a quick question, because I'll reserve a comment, because I do have some comments in terms of maybe not going to Kennedy Lake at all. But that being said, I will support the recommendation. Just a quick question in the draft sequencing in order of magnitude capital program. The table lists 6 capital projects as they're listed out there, and I'm wondering if those were listed in order of priority. Of course, it starts with the expansion of the reservoir itself and then lists the other 5 projects. Were those listed in order of priority, or with that draft sequencing, I made the assumption that it was, but I just want a confirmation of that.
Yeah, thank you through the chair, and thank you for the question. It's a very good question. They were listed generally in terms of priority through the procurement model that staff would like to explore. There is opportunity that projects could be combined throughout the entire program. So as progress is made, that may be optimized, that list. Does that help answer the question?
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Thank you through the chair. My question is just regarding the funding, noting both projects at Okmossis and Kennedy Lake would require work on getting government funding, because Kennedy Lake would be a regional effort, would the cost be split regionally amongst the governments, or would that simply be Tofino's share of what we would be looking at partnering with the neighboring governments?
Through the chair, those costs would be generally based on what the entire project would cost. Tofino's share and then the distribution system coming towards Tofino. There likely would be other costs involved with that, and that focuses on the treatment plant and then into Tofino.
And a follow-up. Through the chair, so taking on a larger project like that, then with regional benefits, would we be getting some of our money back by then charging other governments for water, or how would that funding model look operationally?
Through the chair, if this did go more regional, then there would be like proportionate sharing of different aspects of the project. It would have to be broken out. For example, Tofino would likely not be paying for what Ucluelet's part of the transmission main would be, and there likely would be, as we speak in terms of like a program, there would be multiple projects or components with that project or program, sorry. So maybe for one example, the treatment plant, depending on the demand that various communities and nation would have on that treatment plant, the cost would proportionate, the capital investment cost for that would be proportionately shared likely amongst communities. And then there would be funding that would there would likely be a funding source that would be involved in that as well. I'll leave it at that for now, if that helps me to.
Yeah, I'll wait till everyone else is done and maybe ask one more if there's time.
Mayor Law, did you?
Yeah, I do have a question about timing. It's come up, Councilor Masters noted if Kennedy Lake was, all ready to go, would you go for that? But it looks, and just to recap, so we have significant upgrades that must be done starting now, I suppose. There are 33 million at the low end or mid-range end. How does it look for like that work is ongoing? I assume it's going to start now. Has it all been funded? The existing, like, do we have the funds in our reserves already to go to start that work? Apart from the Okmok's reservoir expansion.
Through the chair, we would have funds because there hasn't been any design work done that would further refine what the cost or the budget would be for all of these various projects. In the existing funds as it is now, likely we will use capital reserves to fund the design component of that, to then start exploring funding avenues. Because there's $61 million, if we call it as a budget for a capital program. The district doesn't have that currently in reserve.
We would know, sorry, not all of it, but we have sufficient reserves to start the process of beginning those essential capital projects or improvement projects that are already scheduled. We have to do them regardless.
That's correct.
Okay.
We have funds to get started in the process.
Okay, Councillor Slimmin.
My question again was regarding the osmosis upgrade. I was reading that the way I read it was would have increased storage, and by my math, according to the MDD, and by 2045 would have about 20 more days of water storage if the population increases according to that chart. Is that correct? And then I'm just having a hard time understanding how would it still be a flow through system, or would it kind of be considered then to be like a storage system? And how many days does it take to recover after like a really dry period when it starts to draw on itself?
Okay. Through the chair side. I'll start with the first. I mean, everything's gonna be in terms of like maximum day demand and how many days of storage and all of that will be based on like how the community plans to grow. So there would be work with Mr. Rogers and Mr. Welsh and their teams to refine what the OCP would be and determine that. So I don't have like a specific number that I could give you, especially like here on the spot as well. And the second one about the flow through system, it would still technically be a flow through system. It's the same. There's a river that comes in, and then there's a dam, and then a pipe going out of the bottom of the dam, or a reservoir, and then a pipe coming out of the reservoir. It would just increase, it would be a larger storage system essentially. And then could you repeat the third question, please?
I'm just curious about like how it would look like before like a state of emergency, I think would be declared, like say we're in a dry period and it hits like critical levels where, you know, maybe we go into stage 3 or 4 water restrictions. How many days of rain would it take to recover? Like how long does it fill back up? I guess it would just be variable because it would be.
Yeah, variable, like depends on how much rain and how many days of consistent rain we get, kind of thing, yeah.
Not a concrete.
No, I mean, there is values in the source water assessment that run scenarios that, okay, if the reservoir is full, then we have a certain amount of days left. If we have normal condition, low flow conditions during the summer, or there's also scenarios that are run in the report. If all of the creeks are dried up as the other extreme as well. And I believe that number, if all the creeks were dried up, I did have that in the report, and I believe it was 14 days.
I see no more hands up at this point. I've one question about lowering the pipe at Aquamox is to give us maybe be able to gather more water from what lies under the reservoir, I imagine. And I'm just wondering, without expanding, only that pipe was lowered, which may not make any sense at all. You look at the whole project, but would that give us any significant additional water if that was isolated, that part of the project was isolated?
Through the chair, just to make sure I clarify. So if the pipe was lowered, so right now the pipe is set higher than the lower of the reservoir. So when the reservoir gets down to 20%, approximately, then there would need to be a pump put into the reservoir to pump the rest of the water out into the pipe or wherever. So if the feasibility says yes, hydraulically you can lower the pipe down, then you would have more access to what the reservoir contains without having to mobilize additional resources to convey water over to Tiffin. You still be able to move water by gravity and maximize how much of the volume of the reservoir we can use.
Pipe's not really at the bottom of the reservoir, so to speak.
No, and you know, part of that could be to, dependent, like at the time when it was constructed, to, you know, minimize how much sediment may be able to get through, or just like whatever's at the bottom.
Yeah, just to follow on that, sorry, that was part of my question that I forgot to ask actually, was the timeline of, I assume that lowering the pipe would be part of the whole Aquamox's reservoir engineering. So it couldn't be done first, for instance, like, you know, it's gotta be part of the larger reservoir expansion.
Through the chair, that is correct.
I know that the local construction work was done to expand it last time we expanded a little bit. And they certainly said that at the time that there was room to expand it more, both dredging and berming. And they kind of went as far as the budget would allow with the expansion of it last time in building it. Do we know anything about previous construction that might inform this next phase of expansion?
Through the chair, yes, there is some records of the pre-existing expansion and staff and the design team would refer to that when building a design for the new expansion.
If there's no further questions, I'll do committee if there's any comments before moving the recommendation. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I didn't have any questions that didn't get addressed. I just wanted to say that I was supportive of this recommendation for osmosis, but to echo Councillor McMaster, I wouldn't want to lose headway on a long-term solution. So I'd like us to kind of keep working towards that. If we think that Kennedy Lake is something that would be viable, then keep those lines of communication open and not reignite that conversation when we get to an emergency situation. But for the time being, I think that this is a good solution.
Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, as Councillor Thomas and Councillor McMaster know, I have about 17 pages of notes here, but I have condensed them. And I'll just read because I think it's important to have the discussion, the larger 30,000 foot conversation about that potential expansion out to Kennedy Lake. And in the report, it talks about the preferred near to medium term water supply option. So the long term option of Kennedy Lake would have to be contemplated, and work on that long term option would need to continue concurrently at an estimated cost of 175 million, but on that 40% contingency, and I would say that would be conservative, we're looking at a $245 million investment. A complex project has been reported out with significant governance, regulatory, environmental, technical, and financial work before construction could even proceed. So I think it's going to be important that council and the community really need to have a heartfelt conversation about growth and the natural constraints to growth, which has been imposed upon us in our ecosystem. Also, that economic and financial constraint that is clearly at 245 million plus. Let's add in the osmosis and all the upgrades that need to be done. We're now talking at over $320 million. So there really is a financial constraint there that I would say. It's clear to me, and I think to many in the community, that this project and the money that would be involved at Kennedy Lake requires a lot of heartfelt discussion, significantly around growth and what we were talking about in growth. Because in the report, it also talks about the ability within the present system, there would be a large investment to increase our raw water storage and reduce drought vulnerability while supporting continued community growth. And I can't read the last notes there. That being said, I think and I believe that to secure Tofino's water security, there are a number of things that I think are necessary. Of course, the expansion, the osmosis reservoir expansion. I do believe discussions on growth that we need to have through the OCP and of course through our zoning bylaw review to look at ways that we'll reduce our demand. I'm also looking at things that have already been suggested and I think are feasible and doable requirements for alternative water supplies for residential commercial growth, whether that be through water storage and or catchment systems for any new growth related to residential. I'm also thinking that the continued upgrades to our system, which we've already talked about, will increase that resiliency as well. Other things that have come up in terms of those emergency in the event that we do have in the extreme events that have been talked about historically, looking at those alternative water supplies from an emergency standpoint from other alternate water providers, and those conversations I know have been made historically and presently. So my question really is for next council and for the community to have is whether that expansion out to Kennedy Lake is the correct solution for the long-term resilience for Tofino's water supply. I believe I don't believe that with the technical requirements that are there, the financial and the ecosystem constraints that are imposed, that we really should be looking at the alternatives to going out to Kennedy Lake as a project. I'll leave it there, but just to say that I am going to support the recommendation for this near to medium, which I think could be a long-term solution coupled with some of the other measures I think will be required to secure Tofino's water resiliency into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
I thought Councillor Steer said that really well. I agree. I support the recommendation. With what Councillor Steer said.
Councillor McMaster.
I can agree to a certain extent, but whether it's economics or growth, we need to start the discussion. We can't wait 20, 30 years and start the discussion. That discussion's got to start now. So I think I support the recommendation. I just think it needs to be strengthened a little bit. That discussion is there in print for the next council and the council after that. We can't just keep on sitting here and coming up every time there's an emergency.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? I'd like to sort of go back, reflect a little bit on certainly Kennedy Lake was at one time the number one idea. I think we didn't have the idea of using Gennard Creek 20 or a little more years ago. And there was found a paper copy of a water report. We had looked at Iron Cap Lake and some other ideas that were tossed around at the time, and that was in that report. And it finally recommended Kennedy Lake. UCLUET at that time had was sort of coming on board, and at that time, unfortunately, the First Nations were not so much involved in the conversation. UCLUET had greater growth ambitions at the time, and they may have some growth ideas. And any solutions, I agree with Councillor Steer, that we look at has to contemplate in a very serious way what our growth potential is. But that's also a regional conversation between all the communities that might be served by a Kennedy Lake water source. So I think the type of growth that all of the communities out here would want, not just Tofino, is another consideration, because any one of the communities might take the lead on a Kennedy Lake project, which would involve us as well, but it might not be over a period of time, next 20 years or so. It might not be Tofino taking the lead on it, but we should keep the conversation alive and be active in it. I also go back to that time when Kennedy Lake was at the fore of the ideas for water sources for the region, and certainly it being quite a large project, it was estimated to be around 22 million at that time, those dollars and those costs, but it was approached with a lot of reluctance, partly, I suppose, due to the idea that it would necessitate a lot of growth to support that system, but also the cost of running that system, and there was something like 20 or 25 pump stations that would be needed to get water from Kennedy Lake to Tofino. All of those would need electricity. Some of them were off the grid. places that the pump stations would be required. So there was a number of engineering technical difficulties and the expense of running such a long pipe was also one of the considerations that made Kennedy Lake lose its momentum. And then following years of council in Tofino, sort of backed away from the Kennedy idea, and that project, those recommendations that came forward from our engineers at the time, and started looking at sources on the other side of Mears Island. I forget the name of the creek. I think it's Bolson, but I'm not sure, somewhere up there. And that also entailed a lot of difficulties in moving the water along a pipe from that area. So anyways, this as a short-term solution is something I would support, but I think we need to keep the Kennedy Lake alive, but certainly won't go forward unless the entire region and all the communities consider their growth potential and their water needs into the future. But yeah, I just wanted to the best of my recollection, run that by staff and council. Thoughts on that? You don't do well. To help inform conversation. Okay,
Nope, go ahead.
is that Jen?
Apologies, I just wanted to point out a discrepancy between the presentation and the report. Stated correctly in the report, and I heard it just mentioned a couple of times, so just for clarity. Out of the 61 million program costs for the recommended option of Moxis, 53.3 million does have to occur in the near future. That's replacement cost of the existing system. So that range, 40% plus or minus, is 31 million, which I think the low end was stated in the presentation, but that range goes up to 74 million based on the 40% plus or minus. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't 31 million that has to happen. It's approximately 53.3 million of the 61 million.
Thank you. Caroline, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. In 25 years, in the past 25 years, the population, residential population, 1,400 in 2001, and now it's probably 2,800 plus the seasonal employee population has most likely doubled, and certainly the visitor population has doubled. And it's like we're well over 16,000 people on a busy day in August in Tofino with essentially the same system that's been improving over time. And so, I just want to talk to Councillor Steer and Councillor Sloman's point is that osmosis is I think is the right way to go. And I can conceivably see that with this investment and improvement in systems, it will allow some growth, enough growth that the community over the next 10, 15, 25 years will reassess, what it means to double again. And maybe, as Councillor Steer pointed out, maybe that's not what the community wants to do. So I think it's a living discussion. Kennedy Lake is a living discussion. And I think that, we can be confident. I think that the community will assess the growth as it's allowed to happen and put their 2 bits in at this council table over the next 10 and 20 years. So that's what
Okay. If there's no more comments or questions, I guess we can move to the recommendation. Somebody like to read that, or shall I move to? Okay, nobody. Oh, Councillor
No,
Sawyer?
okay, go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move from the chair. Recommendations from I'll move that council endorse the Osmosis Reservoir expansion as the district's preferred near to medium term water supply option. And that staff continued engagement with the Tolgert First Nation throughout the planning and development of the project. And that staff be authorized to explore an integrated project delivery, IPD, or other progressive design build procurement model to advance the Osmosis Reservoir expansion and associated water infrastructure renewal works for the purpose of supporting a senior government funding application in 2027. Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? None opposed, that's unanimous. Carried. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And we'll now move to item 8.2. Penal recreation and parks master. Go forward and final draft.
Good. Council, I will be presenting tonight on the 2026 Recreational Parks Master Plan. So just a quick overview of what we'll cover tonight is project status, so where we are along the process, master plan overview, so what is in the master plan itself, and then recommended next steps. So really the intention of the master plan, so the purpose and objectives is really to assess the state of recreational parks in Tofino, recommend priorities and focus areas for the next 10+ years, provide a point of reference to guide how and for what reason the district invests in recreation and parks and related activities, and then provide council and staff with a resource to inform and resource allocation and decision making. So to date, this is where we've traveled along the continuum. So we started off with the first research and engagement fall 2024 to winter 2025. Then we moved into strategic direction setting in the first draft in spring 2025. We then came back to council and also the Recreation Advisory Committee for feedback, and that was April, June 2025. Then we did a refinement of the master plan, hearing the feedback from council at that time throughout the summer into the spring of 2026. And then we presented just in April of this year, the updated master plan with a final round of engagement that happened May to June 2026. We are now in August, and hopefully with the final master plan draft in front of you today. So just a little recap on the research and engagement that went into this plan. So you've been very familiar with the first two boxes. Those have popped up throughout this whole time, but the research methods and tactics. So they really looked at benchmarking trends and best practice research, current service delivery models. They also, RC Strategies are the organization we were working with. Also looked at historical data, both through recreation and parks for Tofino specifically. Then public engagement initially included 234 responses through a resident survey. We had sounding boards with over 145 comments. We had online engagement through Talk Tofino with 405 visits. And then we had 161 responses through the youth survey, which we actually combined with the District of Ucluelet, who is also going through this similar process at the time. And then we had 13 discussion sessions with 34 attendees. And so these were more deliberate groups, more specialized groups or area expertise. And then our final engagement here for May to June 2026 was an additional survey, poster boards at the Tofino Community Hall, and an in-person staff engagement at the 3v3 basketball tournament we held in June. And through that engagement, we received 15 responses back. And then also throughout this entire piece, we also connected with the Recreation Advisory Committee twice. And then did a deep dive on the plan, both in the first and second draft at a staff level to ensure consistency and alignment across the organization. So the master plan is set up with 3 overarching goals. So that's optimizing infrastructure, optimizing service delivery, and optimizing land resources. Within each of those goals, there are strategies. So there are 17 total, and they're organized under each of the goals and provide forward-looking strategic direction. And then further on to that, there are over 42 actions within the plan. So each strategy has 1 or more associated actions, and these provide specific tactics required to carry out the strategy. So a little bit just about the plan itself. So this is just how to use the guide, essentially. There is an implementation. So this is an example of an action within the guide or the plan that has an implementation table at the bottom. So each action has an associated table that outlines high-level timing and resource requirements. This implementation guidance will need to be reviewed and updated on an ongoing basis. And then further to that, on page 10 is the legend that provides, that explains the symbols and terms used throughout the master plan. So that's just, as you're going through and reading it, that's how you want to use the guide itself. And so now into the meat and potatoes of the plan itself. So these are just a summary of what is providing guidance within the plan. So aquatics was obviously a big one for the community. And so this includes both action and strategy related to both infrastructure and service delivery. So we had exploring aquatics infrastructure options in Tofino, including the associated capital and operating costs, siting and other viability considerations, local and regional options. So exploring what those look like from both a infrastructure and programming perspectives. And then looking at other interesting ways to increase aquatics programming opportunities and access through external partnerships, or exploring increased provision of ocean-based swimming programming and facilitating access to aquatics outside the community. Then we move into our indoor recreational programming spaces. So within the guide, it looks at renovating existing spaces at the community hall for improved functionality, accessibility, and placemaking appeal. Developing a business case and supporting advocacy to develop a community hub space. So the existing community hall site, as a note on this, should continue to be focused unless the updates identify limitations and barriers. And then continue to partner with Pacific Rim School District 70 for use of the field and gymnasium. Then looking outdoors, we have both goals and actions associated with wheeled sport amenities. So the master plan does suggest reviewing options for a bike sales park, pump track, or other types of biking amenities, and provides optimal siting criteria. Also notes stable and ongoing investment in Tough City Skate Park, and explore sport court and skate park lighting as part of future village green planning. Then our wonderful parks. So this looks at a few different areas. So both the Village Green concept plan, outlining priority improvements, phasing and opportunities to better connect with surrounding infrastructure, developing plans to enhance 3rd Street Park, Bert de Maria, and Centennial Park. Community gardens was came in very high through all of the research and engagement that we did do with the community. So looking at what it means to establish that amenity with a clear management structure. And then using playground renewals. So that obviously comes up through the asset management plan, and using it as an opportunity to expand play diversity and placemaking appeal. And then piloting dog off leash locations, that has been a conversation for us as a district for many, many years. That is included in the plan as well. So overlaid on top of the entire master plan also includes the ongoing and meaningful collaboration with Squamish First Nation. Focusing on asset management is reiterated throughout the plan as well. Also looking at working regionally with facilitating critical mass for team sports and leagues to make programs viable. Continuing to support and partner with arts and culture organizations to provide arts and culture programming. And then the master plan also provides a tool to help staff evaluate programming, if the who's and who's should provide those programming. Then other key planning and policy actions include developing a trails plan. So this includes both on land as well as water trails, so access points that take you from land into the water. And then developing a washroom strategy, reviewing and updating the public art policy, and ensuring park needs and considerations are included in the future real estate strategy. It will also look at supporting the exploration of the land trust and advancing parks and trail development with considerations of the 30x30 conservation objective, which was part of your strategic plan. So as you can see, it is a diverse and very high-level document that will hopefully provide direction and guidance for the provision of recreational parks and over the next 10+ years. Further to this, once the plan is endorsed by council, staff will ensure it is distributed to appropriate departments and included on our website for public access. And the recommendation here tonight for the committee to consider is that the Tofino Recreation Parks Master Plan, attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report, 2026 Tofino Recreation and Parks Master Plan, dated August 18th, 2026, be endorsed. I take any questions.
Okay.
I was wondering about, in the plan, it says to develop ocean-based swimming lessons. And I was just wondering if ocean should be replaced with nature-based swimming lessons, so it doesn't exclude swimming programming at Kennedy Lake.
Yeah, I thought I grabbed that and I corrected that. So apologies if that's still in the guide. Yeah, I think we were gonna move develop ocean-based aquatics skills and like leave it more broad in general.
Okay.
Than specifically swimming lessons.
Any other questions? Councilor McMaster.
Excellent plan. I think it's been a long road to get here. When does this get reviewed? Is it every 5 years or?
I don't know if I've considered that far yet. I do really, as one of the staff members that will be using it quite frequently, I would really like to review it more frequently, maybe every 1 to 2 years, especially checking back in with the community, I think will be important. I think there may also need to be probably from the next council strategic priorities, some guidance on how we prioritize what we need to focus on within the plan itself.
Question?
Yeah.
Yeah. A little difference between your slide and what was in the plan. The slides talked about lighting the skate park and the sports courts, and it hints in the actual plan about possibly covering the courts, because I think we see even in the summer when the courts are wet, nobody uses them. I think that might be the bigger problem for usage rather than lighting them at night. So I don't want us to forget that option.
Through the chair, maybe just respond saying, I think all those things are not off the table. They would just need to be explored through public engagement.
Thank you.
Yeah, just sorry for clarification, this Councillor Sloman's question, was the ocean-based aquatics is in the plan, it was in the report. How does that work with potential lake aquatics construction? Sorry, that I just want to clarify that.
No,
Is it in,
you're fine.
I don't think it's in the report.
No, so that might make sense to add a wider provision of both lake and ocean.
Just to clarify, was that your point?
Yeah. Okay. I probably think ocean and I think of everything that is outdoors, but yes, that makes sense.
Is and just I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
We're this is a committee of the whole, so we're making a recommendation to council. Council's has the ability to discuss and review this again at regular council meeting. Is it possible to have that included when it comes back to council for endorsement, that or do we like a change in the wording to include lake, or at least not exclude freshwater?
Through the chair, I might ask if we can maybe make that recommendation here and then just include it as part of the next. We'll have to come back to council.
Through the chair, to the committee, we can certainly add that language to the recommendation to right? We could have the recommendation as stated, but have it be endorsed with the inclusion or with expanding the language to include like aquatics, and we will work with the language in the actual plan itself, but it will be amended through that. We can find a way to attach the edited version to the regular council meeting as well. I'll work with the corporate office.
On that, if I move from the chair, be endorsed by council, would that make more sense maybe for tonight, or just leave it at endorsed?
You don't need to, it can be read as stated on the agenda, but add to that to be, as amended to include lake aquatics in the plan, and we will amend it once it's endorsed by council.
Great caption. So we would have to move and then. Final.
I'll just maybe work on some language, but perhaps another committee.
Near law.
Yeah, I already had a suggested amendment for this one. So it's clearly a committee of the whole recommendation, and just by adding be endorsed by council, then with expansion of aquatic or aquatic based language to include lakes. That would cover cover it as a committee of the whole direction, and then when it comes back, council can consider.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Respectfully, I feel that it's already covered in here. Assess the viability of providing aquatics opportunities outside of Tofino would cover lakes. I think getting into the nitty gritty and making amendments to specifically include lake as a word in this, when we don't have lakes in Tofino, is a little bit onerous. It's just kind of creating more work for something that I feel doesn't need to be explicitly stated in here. And I think when it says ocean-based water safety, I think about some of the nuances of the fact that we're surrounded by ocean. So including ocean-based might include teachings about rip currents and tides and ocean swell, and a lot of things that if we remove the ocean-based part, we might remove the fact that we are surrounded by the ocean, and it does include a lot of aspects that wouldn't get considered with pool safety or lake safety. And I think the ocean-based really speaks to our town.
I think what we're we're asking for. I'm not gonna rule on this or anything, but this is a fairly high level document. So we get right down into a very specific task. That is. I think it's generally accepted that that. Would be in some of the options, exploration, what is. Of all sorts. That's feeding. So, you know, if we go down into that level of detail in a high level plan, we could come up with any number of actions. Yeah, we all went around the table and got into specific things. So I'm not really sure if it's necessary to change the language that much. But I'll let you committee that decision. Mayor Law. Was there somebody?
No, I was just pointing out Councillor Thomas because it
Oh.
seemed pertinent to your guys' discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on that, Chair. You know, this is Committee of the Whole. We're being presented with the Parks and Rec Master Plan that's gone through many meetings, as staff have shown. And each time, and in each public engagement period and in the writing, aquatics as at the very, very top and very important. And so I think it's important. I think this is the time and place for the committee to share their opinions. And I think that Councillor Sloman's opinion is valid. Now, it may, it's more clarification from staff. Ocean aquatics includes, is that ocean instruction for swimming? You know, I think it would be good to know from staff clearly if the you know, the reference to outside of the district of Tofino includes potential for lake swimming or lake construction. I think that's important to clarify, and I'd like to see that clarified before I recommend, you know, before I'm going to vote to recommend that council endorse this. I think it's totally valid committee position, time to make the discussions. Maybe with that, if I may ask staff just to give us a little bit more clarity on whether that ocean instruction, is it safety, is there a specific thing, and if out of town opportunities would sufficiently include Councillor Sloman's concerns or the community's concerns for the potential for swimming lessons at the lake. Maybe those two things, and then we can go from there.
Through the chair. I would, when initially the idea of including outside of Tofino was added into the plan, because it did say specifically Port Alberni, it was to broaden out and to encompass more. Because we recognize that there are lakes in between here and Port Alberni. There's also the community of Eculet, which also has a pool. So it was meant to open up to be more broad, to capture both lake and ocean swimming. As staff, we would consider all those options. I think we have to, in order to reasonably be able to facilitate aquatics programming successfully. So I think all options are always on the table when it comes to aquatics.
So the question for me from the chair, do we need to add language? Maybe more comfortable.
I guess I'm more comfortable with like removing the word ocean based, because nature based would include ocean and lake.
Right.
Have nature based aquatics, because that would include ocean and lake. But I do hear. Or Hutchinson saying that, you know, it'll be covered, so I do feel somewhat comforted by that.
So we're going into the plan and changing the wording. Is that it? So, including that in the recommendation. Mayor Law.
I would hesitate to direct staff to change wording specifically, but accept that I think it would be valuable to suggest a change that would include like specifically aquatics at a lake. And you know what I mean? We're not trying to write the report, but we're just trying to make sure it encompasses all that council wants. Their understanding. So that would be my comment, not to meddle in the actual wording, but to have that wording clarified.
Such a signal.
Through the chair, I'm happy to include all the words, if that's the direction. I don't think that's, a bad thing to do. Future us may need that information in there, so I think include it and not need it, but don't include it in.
Tatiana.
I just want to make sure the committee is referring to the same content of the report on page 51 of the plan. Goal number 2 talks about 3 things as part of that goal. One is to explore external partnerships to provide aquatics education, skill development, and access. B, develop ocean-based water safety programming, which I think that's the language that we're contemplating. But C states assess the viability of providing aquatics opportunities outside of Tupelo, which would include offering lessons or aquatics at Kennedy Lake and outside of Tupelo. So if that's the language we're referring to, perhaps the committee can consider what might need to be added to that section, unless we're talking about a different part of the plan, then we can take a look at that as well.
I will not be in favor of changing the language in here. I think this is sufficient. I think it's developed over years. I think it covers everything that I need to cover. I kind of think going in and changing a single word a little unnecessary.
Master.
I mean, heard what Miss Tatiana says. I tend to agree with what Councillor Thomas just said.
And the plans are meant to be worked on over time with input over time as well. So not going to be missed at any time if this council and the community are over time directing some of the courses of action. Sorry, I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I'll just echo Councillor McMaster's and Thomas's comments. I feel satisfied with the wording of exploring opportunities outside of Tokyo as well. I feel that it really highlights our resourcefulness in looking for opportunities for aquatics wherever we need to, whether it's Port Alberni or Kennedy Lake or
so we're back to the recommendation as is that correct?
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up and say, yeah, I feel comfortable.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad we had discussion. Councillor Steer, just giving you an opportunity to chime in. I know you've had your eyes on the recreation and this process. So you must have a question or comment.
Yeah, I do have comment, and I was just listening to this particular discussion, and frankly, for me, I was not so granular in my approach to the report itself. But so, if I may, I'll speak in a more general comments there, and you know, reading the report, looking, you know, as in the report, the purpose is to guide the district's delivery and investment in these services over the next 10 years to support decision-making and priority setting, and how the plan can also help achieve or align with several key objectives of the district. So for me, I was thinking of this from a, once again, as we say, that 30,000-foot level. And so I'm hoping that priority setting over the next 10 years will be contingent, as is outlined in the report, around opportunities for collaboration and funding for some of these infrastructure projects. When we look at those actions in the associated actions underneath the strategies, as you pointed out, there are 42. Some of them are going to require considerable financial and time commitments from staff, and financial commitments that we're going to have to be looking for those collaborative opportunities. I'm also cognizant of the fact that we just finished a report on our water supply issues and the costs that are going to be associated with that to the district, as well as the amount of bandwidth that our staff is going to be consumed with on what I would consider one of the major priorities for our community. So when I looked at this plan, my hope is for the next council is that this plan will be useful in guiding the district's delivering investments in these services, the recreational service, in a very pragmatic and responsible way. So that is what I'm hoping, and I think this plan will give us that opportunity to be able to discuss it at that level. We're going to have to make some very pragmatic and very responsible decisions in the next 10 years to be able to deliver those services, because we have, in conjunction with that, as our water supply issue is going to take up a tremendous amount of bandwidth for the council of the day, and of course the staff associated with delivering on these. So that's my comment in terms of the very granular discussion around the inclusion of that language. To be honest, I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I think if I were to state it, I would probably err to the side, as Councillor Thomas and McMaster and Sawyer have reiterated, in terms of, I think the plan at the level that we're looking at does encompass, and I hope it through that discussion, Councillor Sloman and Mayor Law, they're comforted by that. That would be inclusive of that opportunity to develop any of those potential aquatics out into those freshwater bodies, Kennedy Lake, and maybe elsewhere. So that's my comment on this. Really, it's going to be something that is going to help us over the next decade to be able to make decisions about the delivery of the service. And I think it does a significant job in doing that, but it's going to be the council of the day and community collaborations with other agencies that are really going to be the key to delivering on many of those strategies and the associated actions.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I'm going to let Ms. Hutchinson take a seat. Let's look for questions. We're into comments then on the report. Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you. I was just waiting for the time for comments. I just want to thank staff and Ms. Hutchinson for putting this together so well, and comment on how happy I was to see the wording included of parks and natural spaces as part of our climate strategy. And I really like that wording as well. Identifying the role that the trails play, and as well, potential loop expansion, and identifying the fact that the MUP plays the role of a trail in beach access as well. And just reiterating my previous comments from discussion about this, that rather than seeing any more of Tonquin cleared for trail networking, I'm very in favor of seeing TikTok really push as part of that trail loop itself, and getting people out to see all of it.
Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with a comment saying that I was really pleased with this final draft of the plan. I was so pleased that I was like writing notes, and I was like, oh, I'm just rewriting everything. And so I picked out a couple of my really favorite things. The community gardens were really a great point in this. And I also really loved the attention to the wheel-based sports. And of course, I always have the interest of aquatics. And then I really also, as Blair said, I really am happy to see all the respect for the nature and the conservation throughout the plan.
Mayor Law.
Yeah, I just over the past 25 years I've been here, Parks and Recreation has been probably one of the biggest issues brought up by community members. It's one of the most valued services that the district provides to many people in Tofino. And I think it's great to see all the effort, expansion of Parks and Recreation that's happening and has happened. And I do also want to say, you know, that I do find it one of the issues that always gets kicked back about cost. As if Parks and Recreation are somehow, disposable income or potentially, expensive to provide to the community. And I just want to say, look, it's what I've heard the community wants for everybody from infants to the elderly. Visitors love our Parks and Rec. It's part of what holds our community together. It's not disposable. It's a priority. That's been clear. And we have, for the first time, dedicated funding from paid parking that's neither taxed. It doesn't come from us. It comes from people who are visiting. So I just want to say that it's important. We'll love to see this, see the community's values reflected in council decisions, and we have the ability and we've got the funds. So great. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. My comments, I very much appreciated the public process and the inputs and participation of the community in developing the plan. And I think that we've arrived at a place with the best plan that we've seen in Tofino for Parks and Rec. I really appreciate the broadening of activities outside of, I felt like earlier plans kind of focused more on the sports and physical activities, and I think it's broader and recognizes other events and services and arts, etc., that are included in the plan. So it's broadened the range of activities to participate in, and over the next while, I think the community will enjoy further participation in some of the actions that are coming up from this. So that's my comment. Good work on it. Good participation and input. Come up with a great plan. Now move the recommendation. If there's no more comments, that the Tofino Recreation Parks Master Plan attached is Appendix 1 to the staff report 2026 Tofino Recreation Parks Master Plan dated August 18th, 2026 be endorsed. Second by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? It's carried. Discussion. Yes, sure. We'll call a 5-minute recess. Resume, I'll call the meeting back to order. And we move to item 8.3, 2026, quarter two financial report. Ms. Warwick, present.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today I'll be presenting the district's quarter two financial update, and this will cover our financial results through June 30th. This report provides an opportunity to assess how financial results are tracking against our budget midway through the year. And as some of our variances reflect timing of revenues, expenditures, and various projects activities, the focus at this stage for staff is identifying emerging pressures and new opportunities throughout the financial plan. As a quick reminder, the financials presented today are unaudited, so they are subject to change throughout the remainder of the year. Today's presentation is organized into 3 sections. I'll begin with an operating update, including key revenue sources and expenditure trends across the various service areas. I'll then provide an update on the district's major capital projects, including overall progress and some notable project developments. And finally, I'll conclude with a summary of the district's financial position. And with that overview in mind, I'll start with the operating update. So this slide here provides an overview of the funding sources that support the district's financial plan in 2026. Revenues are generated from a variety of sources, and I'm not going to touch on all of these listed here in this presentation, but I will provide an update on some of our key revenue sources. As shown on the last slide, property taxation accounts for approximately 17% of total municipal revenue. Approximately 1,400 tax notices were sent out in May, and the due date for payment was July 2nd. I won't provide an update on supplementary adjustments today, but any associated risks and more information about that will be provided in the quarter 3 financial update later this year. So this slide shows a few different things. This is generally where our taxes receivable balances are at the property tax due date of July 2nd. Now, July 2nd technically falls outside of Q2, but this is a bit more of a current picture of property tax collection because between June 30th and July 2nd, we tend to see a huge influx of property tax payments right before the deadline. And this is a comparison over the last 3 years. So the first section on the left are current taxes receivable, and they are lower than in previous years. And this year equal just under 5% of the total tax levy for 2026. And that's compared to just over 6% in 2025 and 6.5% in 2024. So when we look at and see lower current receivables, that suggests that taxpayers are paying their balances more quickly, and there's a stronger ability to pay with fewer outstanding amounts owed. As required under legislation, a 10% penalty was applied to all unpaid balances of current taxes after the due date of July 2nd. The middle cluster on this chart shows our taxes in arrears, and those represent unpaid taxes from the prior year. You can see they are somewhat higher than in recent years. These balances tend to fluctuate from year to year. This current level isn't considered something significant that staff have any concerns about, and we continue to monitor this and pursue our collections as part of our normal operations. And then the last cluster on the right hand of the screen are delinquent taxes outstanding. So those represent the 3rd year of unpaid taxes. Similar to taxes in arrears, these balances fluctuate from year to year. And even though they're very small balances, this is something that staff pay close attention to because ultimately they could result in properties being included in the annual tax sale. The annual tax sale is a legislated process and really is the final mechanism that allows municipalities to recover long outstanding property taxes.
It's conducted as required by all municipalities across British Columbia on the last Monday of September, which this year is scheduled for September 28th. The district hasn't had a tax sale since 2019. And as of today's date, we currently have 5 properties with delinquent taxes owing, and that represents a balance of just over $8,000. It is worth noting that only one of these properties is eligible for a tax sale. Fees and charges are another very important source of revenue for the district, and they account for approximately 19% of municipal revenue. And the district collects a wide range of fees and charges in support of our services. While this slide highlights several of the district's fees and charges, over the next few slides, I'm only just going to focus on some of the key ones. Within community programs, most of the revenue streams are performing as anticipated, but there is a significant variance as it relates to filming fees. Unlike in previous years, there has been no filming activity within the district to date this year. The productions that typically film in Tofino are small or medium-sized productions, and staff understand that increasing travel and accommodation costs may be influencing decisions to travel on location to more remote destinations. As a result of this current situation, staff are reassessing planned arts, culture, and heritage program expenses throughout the remainder of the year to ensure that spending remains aligned with all available funding. The district generates revenue through our bylaw services area. Business license revenue is currently exceeding expectations with approximately 781 business license issued to date in 2026. And this is an increase over 2025, which had 742 business licenses. Revenue growth in conjunction with the increase of licenses is also being supported by the annual 3% fee increase, which is established in the business license regulation bylaw. Our violation revenue is also exceeding expectations. Staff are attributing this in part to the introduction of our online credit card payment options, which have made it much easier for individuals to pay their fines and have improved overall collection rates since implementation. Parking revenue is also higher than at this time last year. That's driven by a combination of continued parking demand and a 25-cent per hour increase to the downtown parking rates. While parking revenue is highly seasonal and is largely concentrated during the summer months, these year-to-dates are very encouraging. Water and sewer revenues are influenced by both our annual rate increases and seasonal consumption patterns. Utility revenue is very seasonal, as we're all aware, with the highest usage occurring in the summer months. So these comparisons are year to date, so to June 30th over the last few years, as opposed to a budget to actual analysis. Revenues continue to trend upwards. You'll see a large increase between 2024 and 2025, specifically in the sewer, which is the green column. That's largely related to the wastewater treatment plant coming online and all of the associated fee increases based on that. While our utility revenues have continued to increase, our consumption has decreased compared to previous years. This trend may reflect cumulative impacts, conservation efforts, increased public awareness regarding our water usage, occupancy levels within the district, and ongoing efficiency improvements to our water system. The district remains under stage 1 water restrictions, which came into effect in May of earlier this year. The stage emphasizes conservation awareness with minimal restrictions to water use. So the lower consumption we're seeing indicates that this conservation messaging is having an effect on consumption. And council may recall that the 2025 utility rate review didn't identify a need for any rate increases beyond the district's standard 4% annual adjustment noted in the bylaw. And staff are currently undertaking the 2026 review and will report back to council with the results and any recommendations once that work is complete.
Grant funding, as always, remains an important source of revenue for the district and represents approximately 11% of municipal revenue within our 2026 budget. This slide provides an update on some of the district's grant activity, some successful applications, some still under review, and some that were unsuccessful to date. The district received more than $30,000 through a community event support grant to host the West Coast Soccer Celebration during the summer's World Cup soccer event. Earlier this year, the district was also awarded $70,000 through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for the West Coast Regional Climate Adaptation Planning Collaboration. Staff were also successful in securing a $100,000 UBCM grant for the 2026 Local Government Development Approvals Project, and these funds will help support and expand the ongoing zoning bylaw review work. Several applications remain under review. One of them is a request to the Building Community Strong Fund to support the creation of an indoor recreation facility. Not all of our applications have been successful this year. The district was notified earlier this year that an application for EOC training funding through UBCM was not successful. And the fire hall replacement and training ground project application through the Strategic Priorities Fund was also not approved. And we'll talk about these projects a little bit later in the presentation. Again, this is really only a snapshot of the current grant activity. Staff continue to pursue external funding opportunities to reduce reliance on internal funding sources. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge staff and the significant effort that's involved in identifying these grant opportunities, preparing applications, and meeting all of the reporting requirements. Regardless of the outcome, these efforts continue to provide value to the district and to our community. And with the revenue update complete, I'm just going to move into our operating expenditures. So this slide provides a high-level overview of expenditures by service area as of June 30th. Overall spending is generally tracking as we're expecting. Approximately 57% of the total budget is remaining through for the rest of the year. It is important to note expenditures are not incurred evenly throughout the year. Spending patterns vary by service area and the season. There are a few notable variances that I've highlighted here. Within the daycare, 73% of the budget is remaining. This is primarily due to the timing of recruitment activities and the planned childcare program expansion. Planning services also has 76% of their budget remaining. That's largely due to the timing of projects and various work plan activities, and I'll be going into that in more detail shortly. Within fire services, we see that only 43% of the budget is remaining. This is reflecting training activities that are largely complete for the year and some unplanned apparatus repairs. And while we see that expenditures are generally in line with expectations, staff continue to monitor several factors that could affect our year-end results. So one of the pressures that we're monitoring for our budgets are the province's expansion of PST to professional services that are commonly used by the district. These changes will increase the cost of some services, although the full financial impact is not quite yet known. Staff are currently reviewing our budgets and project estimates to account for these additional costs, and those will be coming into effect on October 1st. Fuel costs were a notable pressure point during the first half of the year. Global oil market disruptions led to elevated and volatile fuel prices, creating a lot of uncertainty for our operating budgets. To help offset these impacts across the country, the federal government temporarily suspended the fuel excise tax on both gasoline and diesel from April 20th through September 7th, providing some short-term relief from these volatile costs. Locally, the temporary closure of one of Tofino's 2 fuel suppliers required the district to make a bulk fuel purchase to ensure operational continuity. While this bulk purchasing limits our flexibility to benefit from any price fluctuations, it has ensured fuel availability and avoided disruptions to our district operations. To help manage unforeseen costs and operational requirements that arise throughout the year, the district maintains contingency allocations within our annual budget. This table outlines the contingency allocations that have been approved to date within the general fund and shows that we have a balance remaining at June 30th of just over $130,000. This table shows the balances of contingency funds for both the water and sewer fund. So there's a balance remaining within the water fund of just over $50,000 and the full contingency amount of $75,000 remains within the sewer fund. Staff are very comfortable with these contingency balances and believe it provides adequate flexibility to address any potential pressures that we've identified as we move throughout the rest of the year. As discussed earlier, many of the expenditure variances in our operating budgets are related to the timing and the progression of planned projects. This slide provides an overview of the status of those operating projects and where they're currently sitting within the project cycle. So you can see projects are at various stages of completion, which is very typical at this point of the year. Among these, I did want to highlight a few projects that have experienced some timeline changes and some of the completed projects. Some operating projects within both emergency planning and planning services have been deferred to 2027. This is to allow staff to focus on some higher priority projects and some key deliverables that have been identified as staff are refining their work plans for the year. These projects include the add-on to the emergency planning communications plan, the social story project, the second phase of the emergency program strategic plan, the dark skies policy, and the tree protection bylaw. The EOC training grant project is largely complete with all remaining 2025 grant funding now spent. As I mentioned earlier, the district's funding application for 2026 was unsuccessful, so no additional work is planned under the current project. This is work that we typically apply for annual grants that are available, so staff will continue seeking future funding opportunities to advance this work. The 2026 OCP update is also complete with growth projection updates being finalized. This was a standalone update and was not intended to be a comprehensive review of the official community plan. The full OCP review remains planned for future years. So I'm going to turn now to the capital program and provide a high-level overview of the project status and highlight a few key projects in detail. So similar to our operating projects, this chart focuses on a high-level overview of the district's capital program as of June 30th. The district is currently managing 24 capital projects, with the majority either underway or in early stages of implementation. As expected at this point in the year, several projects have not yet started. To date, 4 projects have been completed and 1 has been deferred. Overall, the capital program is tracking as expected. Projects are moving forward based on available resources, funding, and schedules. The Headworks Platform Edition project includes installation of a permanently installed steel maintenance platform at the screening and grit removal equipment, which is located within the Headworks building at the wastewater treatment plant. The installation of a permanent platform in lieu of a recurring use of temporary scaffolding is intended to provide consistent access for routine maintenance, eliminate recurring costs, and reduce setup time. This was intended to be complete in 2026, but it's been deferred to 2027. The project may require additional funding for architectural services, and that's to ensure the design meets the building code based on the building inspector's request. As mentioned in the grant update, the district was unsuccessful in its application for external funding to support the fire hall replacement project through the Strategic Priorities Fund. Staff are debriefing with the province to better understand the application results and identify any opportunities to strengthen future submissions. And in the meantime, staff are reviewing potential next steps, including funding and project delivery options to determine how best to advance this work. Further updates on this project will be provided to council as this work progresses. An exciting project that's underway is the installation of Tsunami Siren number 5. This project will improve the district's tsunami warning and emergency notification network. In 2025, staff completed audibility testing to determine the most effective location for an additional siren, and the site has now been confirmed at Tonquin Park Road. Equipment has been ordered and installation is currently anticipated to be complete by the end of the third quarter. The 2026 multi-use path upgrades have been completed, and that was for work between 960 and 830 Campbell Street. This project was completed earlier this year and is currently tracking below budget. Final project costs may change with the year-end audit as it's completed, but these results are looking good. The Sharp Creek Dam remediation project addressed areas of exposed reinforced steel identified as a preventative maintenance priority within the district's water master plan. This project was also completed successfully earlier this year and is currently tracking below budget. Many of the projects that we've discussed today and all of the projects including our financial plan are supported through long-term financial planning, reserves, and borrowing. I'm going to move into the final section of today's presentation and provide an overview on the district's investments, interest income, and debt position. A significant portion of the district's reserves and restricted revenues, such as DCCs, are invested through the Municipal Finance Authority to earn investment income while keeping our funds available for future projects and priorities. Investment returns remain strong through the first half of 2026. As of June 30th, the district had just under $25 million invested with MFA, and they're earning a return of just over 2.5%. Because the district maintains healthy cash balances throughout the year, investments are generally left in place so we can maximize interest earnings, and we only access them when we need to for cash flow for major capital projects and for year-end balancing of our accounts.
Yeah, just a question on the investment return. Is that an annual investment or is that return to date?
This would have been the interest rate at June 30th.
Is that
Annual.
Oh, that's annual.
So interest earned on the district's primary operating bank account is an important source of non-tax revenue and helps support our ongoing operations. As of June 30th, approximately $36,000 in interest income had been earned. Interest earnings generally increase in the second half of the year as property tax revenues are received. But because interest income supports the operating budget, this is a number that staff continue to monitor very closely.
I have a question on that too. Interest earned on reserves, do they go back into the designated reserve or?
They do, yes, thank you. So this interest income here is interest earned just on our district's cash account or operating bank account. Everything that's earned on our reserves remains invested. As of June 30th, the district's outstanding debt was approximately $10.1 million. There's no new borrowing currently planned for 2026, and debt servicing costs are tracking as we've expected. Most of the district's debt is set at fixed interest rates. We do have a small portion of short-term borrowing and equipment loans that are subject to variable rates, but they've remained relatively stable so far this year, and the district's debt position remains stable at June 30th. Overall, the results to date are consistent with staff's expectations, and the district remains in a stable financial position as we move into the second half of the year. Staff are continuing to monitor financial performance, and updated information will be provided to council through upcoming financial reports and through the annual financial planning process. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Comment, if there are no questions.
Never mind.
Oh.
Councilor Stewart.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just a quick question regarding the contingency funds. When they're not utilized in a fiscal year, where do they go? I can't remember.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So our contingency funds, if unused, typically just are included in our annual surplus calculations.
Thank you.
And that would be those projects that came in under budget. Does it return to the funding source? Or do they go into the general surplus?
Thank you. So it depends on the specific project and what its funding sources are. Any operating projects that may be funded by taxation, those dollars would just potentially roll into the annual surplus calculations. If projects, larger capital projects, or even operating projects that have other funding sources from reserves or grants, the reserves would just maintain those balances as we go through the audit process and finalize those. And any monies for grants or different things would be deferred to be used in a following year for whatever that specific purpose of those monies is.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Great presentation. Okay, I'm just gonna call a point of privilege.
Just 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a small comment. One that I really appreciate the report and thank you. And it's just like it's really basic, but I think this report was one of the first where all the information was like clustered in the middle of the screen and no lines were cut off. And it was just really easy to read. And I want to make note of that.
Okay, thanks. I don't have a recommendation on that to receive it or anything, so I guess we can move on to item 8.4, 2026 Q2 action tracking report. And Ms. Larson will
Thank you.
introduce this.
From the DJ booth. I don't have a presentation tonight, but I did just want to introduce the action tracking report and for the committee's review this evening. So this is the Q2 report on all of the actions that have been assigned to staff over the course of last year that are either currently active or postponed or pending. And so I'm available if you have any questions about specific projects or timelines. I don't have a presentation for you tonight.
Questions on that? Guess that brings us to the end of our business then. With no unfinished business. So I'll turn to Ms. Hefner to call for a question period if there are any people signed up.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I will now make an open call for questions to both members of the public present in the gallery and those participating online. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, please raise your hand. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to ask a question, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before asking a question, you will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I will now give you a call. Calling twice. Calling 3 times. There are no comments at this time, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. So, that's the end of our meeting. I'll move adjournment. Carried. Unanimous.